All right, let's make a formal introduction for our listeners. Good afternoon, Lance. My name is Claudia. I'm calling you from Washington, D.C., from the studios of Fairfax City. We are very humble and grateful that Lance Austin Olsen accepted our invitation to the show. Hey, Lance, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you very much, and I was very honored that you asked me.
Oh no,
or
no problem.
Found me, in fact.
We found you. Yeah, we'll know. We'll tell more about that during the interview. Let me ask you at the beginning. I mean, which came first, the art or the music? One, I suppose, fit the other, or feel free to elaborate. All my questions are open-ended questions. I'm here to listen. I'm like a psychologist, Lance. Whether you want to elaborate 30 seconds or 3 minutes, I will listen to you on recording interviews.
Well, don't let me ramble on too much.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the visual arts, the paintings came first. When I was 15 years old, I went to an art school in England. It was one of the top 3 in Europe, called Camberwell Art School, and it had a lot of really excellent artists teaching there, and quite a number of them became quite famous. One of them, Frank Auerbach, who was one of my painting teachers, his paintings sell for millions. He's about 94 now, but still working slowly. But that's really where it started. I left school at 15, and then I really had no idea what I was going to do. I was kind of lost, and the art teacher at the school said to me, "Well, of course you're going to art school." And I said, "Art school? They have schools for this stuff?" I thought, boing goes the light bulb on my head. I don't have to get a job. I can go to art school. And I'd always liked drawing. So they made an appointment for me, and I showed up with some, a bunch of scratchy old drawings and one big old painting that I'd done. And they accepted me at the school, much to my surprise. And so I spent 5 years there. It was great because it put me around people who were interested in what I was interested in, girls, beer, art,
Pizza, maybe.
Yeah. But it was, for a young guy who was sort of lost, really, like most people at 15 are lost. You don't know what the heck you're going to do. You just assume something's going to come along or not. So it was really quite good, and I got a lot out of that. I left there when it was 5 years later. So I was about 20 when I left, and shortly after that, I got married. When I was 23, I got married and then moved to Canada. And, and I just lived a relatively ordinary life. I just would work on my paintings, and I'd, look for a job here, a job there when we first got, just to pay the rent and stuff like that. Pretty much like anybody else does. I mean, the one thing we learned at art school was that, one out of a million will walk out and suddenly become famous. The rest of us just have to keep working like everybody else for the rest of your life on things. And I'd always viewed what I did really as my job. I don't sit there, waiting for some form of inspiration, cleaning brushes and things. I mean, that's complete nonsense. I mean, your inspiration comes from actually working. I think it was an American artist, Chuck Close, once said that inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just get up and go to work every day. Walk out to the studio, you get your stuff, and you start working. And from what you're doing, something may or may not, but eventually comes. But the idea of sitting there going, well, when I have an inspiration, I'll paint something is really quite foolish. You just work every day, and things come. Things develop.
But in terms of music, Lance, were you born like in a musical family at all? Were you a guy that, your parents put you to, to play guitar or piano or anything like that?
No, none of that at all. It was it was really quite interesting because it was in I'd always listened to sort of all kinds of weird things. I mean, I was very interested in Friedrich Jorgensen. He was a very interesting dude that was recording, the sounds of dead people and things like that. I always found this sort of quite fascinating because I thought, well, why would anybody do that? And then I'd listen and go, well, that's very interesting, you know. Anyway, and between that and the jazz and the blues and things that I'd listened to, this was just mostly what I listened to. And there was a few sort of pop music, but not very much, you know, because I didn't have a radio at the time, and I played all my old, all my old blues records and things like this. Anyway, when I went to work at the art gallery in that art rental thing in 1996, I met this young guy, Jamie Druin, right? And we sort of became friends, and I had a look at his portfolio of photographs. I thought, holy moly, these are good. You know, I got him a show. And a couple of years later, he said to me, you know, he says, I think we should do some sound performances. There's nothing going on like this in this town. I said, sound performances? I said, but I don't actually play anything in a regular sense. And I had been working on this series of engravings. I've got a plate here. You know, I had a whole bunch of these copper plates, okay? And I was doing dry point engravings. And he said to me, he said, well, look at this. He says, this is a piezo mark, Mike. He said, what happens if you stick it on this? I got some tape and I stuck it on that thing. And I said, don't, again, the light bulb. I said, holy moly. And I moved this thing around. I said, well, that is really interesting, you know? And I thought, I began to sort of see it as, well, it's the same as painting, you know, suddenly for me. And you know, I come out here, I got 5 tubes of paint and I put it up there and it's kind of a mess. And I move it around here and I put something there and I move it around. And during the day, suddenly, you know, something will come from what is originally just these 3 or 4 tubes of paint. And I thought, well, if I approach the sound in the same way, because you know, there's sounds everywhere. If I can start finding all these minimal sound, all kinds of sounds, and approach it the same as a painting, think about it in terms of, you know, this is raw material and, you know, it needs to be spaced in specific ways, you know, and that's really where I first started with it, was because he decided that we were going to do performances just right out of the air. And of course, I've always been one that said, well, sure, I can do that. You know, just, you know, give me a time and I'll work with things and something will happen. You know,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it was a bit like, you know, when I first saw my younger daughter doing the first Olympic triathlon race, right? And she, at the end of it, she comes out and she says, well, what do you think, Dad? And I said, well, shit, I could do that. I'd thrown the glove down, right? And so what did I do? I spent 5 years doing triathlon racing, which was great. Unfortunately, I'd started at 59, which is a little late, you know, to become really that good at racing when they're all 20-year-olds. But it was just, that was my kind of attitude. But you know, I can do this. You know, let me think about this and listen. And this is really how it came. I started listening to all kinds of sounds, going out recording field recordings, you know, ants, things, cars going by, rain, you know, tin cans being kicked around, beer cans, and all of that. You know, I began to realize that, okay, here's all the raw material. And if I approach it in exactly the same way as I approach a painting, I just come out each day and I start working. You know, I'll work with this sound and that sound, and then almost going back and doing the score afterwards, because what I would have is maybe 5 or 6 hours of stuff, okay, raw material. And in that, I'd suddenly go, oh, there it is. And I take that, and then I begin to think about the spacing, you know, the quietness and the, you know, the harmonics of it, how it's going to work, how is it working for me, exactly the same way as I worked with paintings. And that's really how it's come about. And I've just added things, you know, harmonicas and tape recorders and half broken guitars and all kinds, you know, things I've made with piezo marks and boxes and rubber bands. And you know, I use all of these things to basically generate the kind of sounds I want. But of course, without computers, we would be in trouble in this kind of thing, because the thing is, you can you can actually sit there with it on your lap, and you can actually edit all this stuff. Yeah, you don't have to go and rent a huge studio and you go, oh man, I got to be very careful because this is costing money. But since I'm not charging myself anything, I can do absolutely anything and find something in there.
You mentioned, thank you. You mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned, Claudius, it's sound everywhere. Well, there's color, texture, paintings everywhere, but the question is what goes with what? How you put it together. For example, right? If behind you to your right, there's a painting with green and kind of brown and gray and so forth. So, how do you know what? How do you know what goes with what, or what should go with that one?
Well, okay.
Because you mentioned, okay, I mess around with this and that, and eventually I have 2 hours or something, right? Let's call it music. Well, it is music, right? It's not pop music, it's not rock music, but it's music. How do you know that, well, I like the 10 second, the next 3 minutes, I don't like it, I will remove it, and then in an hour from now, I did something interesting, I will glue it together. How you figure out what the end process or the end product should be?
Well, there's the rub. It is almost an instinctual thing, I mean, I've always been, again, starting with painting and drawing, very, very interested in spacing, in the quiet and the sound, the quiet and the sound, or the nothing and the something, the nothing and the something. I've always really found very interesting, and I find the same thing in the sort of the poetry that I like to read. It doesn't jam everything at you. It's very difficult to explain. It really is a process of I mean, I have notions, right? And very often I'll have an idea and I'll get something down really quickly, okay? And that then may lead on to something completely different. Generally it does. You start off with this sort of, I've got this idea. And then by the time you get to this other side here, it's got nothing to do with this at all. It's become something else that came through you, that while you were doing this, while you were moving this, listening to that, playing with this, it suddenly gave you this, wow, yes moment, which you then follow. Now, I'm not sure how much sense that makes, but it is how it works for me. I mean, it's a very abstract process. My paintings are all, I used to be a figurative painter, and I can draw perfectly well, but mostly my work is abstract. I mostly work with the paintings. I'll work with giant brushes, like from the hardware store, and put it in, and I may come in, I put 3, this is like 90 inches long, almost 8 feet, 9 feet, 3 sheets of paper, and I may come in and just look and see there's that green there. I'll use that, put the brush in, run right across the whole thing like this, and then just sort of go in and have a cup of coffee or something, come out a couple of hours later to see what has developed, because it's run and it's moved, and it might come out and go, interesting, and then I make the next move on it.
I think you mentioned that you have done like 56 or over 50 different compositions so far. Do you sort of go back and forth between the painting side of you and the music side of you? You go 1 week, you're tired of drawing, painting, and you go back to music, and then after music 5 days you go back to painting. You do that? How in your head you're able to?
I do that, and one of the interesting things is that if I find that I'm looking at or listening to something and it's starting to sound too much like something that I've already done, Now I don't believe that one should be trying to do something different every 15 minutes, right? But if something sounds like a much more polished up version of something that you already did, and this applies for paintings too, and this is one of the great dangers for artists, and particularly if they start getting paid a whole bunch of money for something, and that is sticking with what I call their logo or their style. and not moving too far from it. And so you'll have a look at something that was done, yesterday, and then something that was done 10 years ago. And the one that was done yesterday looks like the one 10 years ago, except it's shinier. You know what I mean? So what is kind of nice for me is if I find that's happening, I say, I've seen this painting before. I've got to stop here. I'll just go and start working on sounds, work on that for a while. And then the same thing there. If I suddenly go, you're getting a bit repetitive here, it's time to just drop everything and go do something else. So that back and forth is actually very, very helpful for me. It's me getting stuck. I mean, I do work in sets and series. I'll do a series of recordings, and they're based on a similar notion, maybe 2 or 3 albums. And then I'll move off. So I don't just go, well, I've done this, I'm never going to do it again. That's kind of silly. I mean, it's like an artist saying, well, I've used red, never going to use that again. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, so for me, I was telling you before that I really love kind of space, electronic music, bands like, I don't know, Tangerine Dream or Klaus Schulze or Manuel Goshin and so on and so forth, and, the people that did Popol Vuh, that did the music for Werner Herzog soundtrack, right? So, but the kind of ambient, and then more in your case, your experimental music, it require a different kind of set of mind, if you will, to capture the stuff. At the beginning, some years ago when I started listening to experimental music, it took me a while to try to understand the meaning of stuff, and try to. I'm an engineer, right? I'm a computer scientist, so I've always tried to make sense of the world, if you will, right? And everything I do, right? Because I was trained that way, right? I'm not an artist at all. I'm kind of very logical in my approach to do anything. And with experimental music, I was listening. It takes me a while to get my head, around it. Maybe I'm approaching the stuff incorrectly, or maybe that's what it is. It's experimental. It's it's not a pop track. It's not jazz. It's not rock. It's not electro music. Who you think the average folks that listen to your stuff? Who you selling your end product to? Who's buying your music, for example?
Gosh, I really don't know. It seems to varieties of people buy the stuff. Yeah, it was interesting what you say, because I think that the painting and working with the sounds, and that is really my way of making sense of my world.
That's right.
And it's almost like I see paintings over the years that have gone by, almost like my sort of footsteps through the world. It's the same footstep, but it changes as everything changes. And what am I trying to say here? Yeah, I'm not sure that there's any sort of right way of listening to things. You listen, and I mean the things that I listen to, and they've sold hundreds or thousands, they're very popular. I go, why? I mean, it's the same.
That's right.
Yeah, why? And another one of those things. Why? And so, and again, it relates back to the paintings. That one is trying to. You're not sitting there trying to do something that's completely original, because I mean you'll fail. That's not how you approach it. But you're working, and you're trying to get you to begin to show up in these things. Your notions of things. Your sort of discovery of the world. I mean, I think it was the field recordings that first sort of got me interested, because I started to, I've always sort of listened outside. I mean, I've never walked around with headphones on. I mean, I just don't do that. And when we had the hotel, the small hotel, my wife and I would get there at 4 o'clock in the morning, because the first meals were served at 6, right? And what I found very interesting, we never spoke because we knew what we were doing, but the house, the old sort of building would wake up, and there was all these wonderful sounds of this place waking up. And I always found that really quite fascinating, and to a degree, that's how I approach, the sort of sound work and things it's almost like not a specific narrative, but almost like, the movie that's in my head, and this is the soundtrack for what's going on now. A lot of the people that I've worked for, particularly, I've been doing quite a bit of work in the last couple of years with the Venezuelan Gil Sanson, and I mean, he's a trained musician and composer, and I mean, he reads all the things that I can't read. I mean, I can't read notation and stuff like that. I just don't. But he likes working with me, and initially, I really couldn't figure out why, but we just seemed to have something that worked together. He would send me something, and I would go, and send it back, and you go, and there was never any explanation as to do this or why or what. It was just, that works. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's the right thing.
So you send files back and forth, and you add his piece, then he sent to you, you add your piece, and blah blah blah, and eventually after a couple of weeks.
Okay, sometimes we do that. But for example, the last thing we did, which was it was put out on a thumb drive, because it was 3 CDs worth of work. And how that had come about is, I work in this sort of studio, which is, very small, and I've got stuff everywhere in here. And I've been working on these sound, and I began to realize, that every time if I drew something, I was recording it, touching pieces of paper, it was recording, moving this, it was recording. I realized that the whole sort of score that I was working on was actually this building, that I was inside the score. So once I had that notion, I then took photographs in here and sent them to Gil, and I said, Gil, okay, here we are. I'm producing the work here from the inside of this score, and I've sent you photographs so you can actually produce your pieces from outside of the score. And so we did not work together on these things at all, other than that notion. This is what I'm doing, and here's the photographs. And it worked wonderfully.
Man, that's amazing. I don't have that kind of talent. I mean, I do certain stuff, Lance, or I don't. I mean, like the difference between maybe an engineer or an architect, right? An architect can, draw the stuff, figure out, and, show you a drawing to a guy like me, a buyer of a house, whatever. And I see I like it or I don't like it. But if I try to draw it to see what I like, I wouldn't be able to do it. I need to be presented with a visual thing, or a music type, or a painting, or whatever. Like we talked before, right? So yeah. I understand Monet.
Yeah, but without the engineer, the architect building would fall down.
You
need both got to be there. One, does it stand up? Yes, it will stand up if you do this, and this, right?
That's right. Yeah, but some people are very, very talented, or figured out something like you, figured out something for nothing. Whatever nothing means, but I cannot do that. I need to be presented with the stuff. I can't believe it. And I think we talked before. In terms of art, I understand Monet, I understand Dalí, but it baffled me that, of course, I've been in the majority of museums all over the world, and I see many Picassos in front of me, and it baffled me that people are willing to pay $15 million or $20 million. I don't understand it. I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's not famous or whatever, but
well, the whole art world has become a sort of a corporate shill, really. I mean, all the artists who make a lot of money who are alive now, there's very few of them. There's a few people make all the money because it's become almost like stocks and shares. They're not going to be allowed to fail. Now, with regards to Picasso, I mean, Picasso did so much and went in so many directions. I mean, his mind was really, really interesting, and I love a lot of his work. I'm sort of baffled as why people will pay that kind of money, but it really does come down to, well, I'm rich, I can afford to do it, so I'm going to do it. So see what I've got, attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just becomes this competition to keep more and more expensive, I mean, look at poor old Vincent van Gogh. I mean, he made nothing in his life. He'd roll over in his grave if he saw all these horrible projected Van Gogh things that the people are paying to go to see, of all those wonderful paintings, and thank God for his brother who saved everything.
Saved the stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And there was a book written by, what was it called? Anyway, it was called Lust for Life. They made a movie out of it. And it was written in the early 1940s. And when the author tried to get that book, and it was about Van Gogh, published, he had a hell of a job, because the publishers would say, who the heck wants to read a book about an unknown Dutch artist? And that was just in the 40s. So, it's like, wow, that long ago. I was alive then.
Yeah, it's amazing that sometimes people, whatever, musicians, artists in general, they are not appreciating society at the time. Some people do, but other people don't, right? It takes another generation, 2 generations, whatever. And that guy 50 years ago, 100 years ago, was very, very good, man. Why nobody discovered that, or why he ended up dying, poor or deaf or
exactly,
or blind or whatever.
There's no reasoning for it. I mean, that's why one you just do your work. You have to sort of believe in what you're doing, and if you sit there hoping that everyone else is going to think you're great and throw money at you, well, you're just an idiot. What we do is like everybody else. I mean, I just get up in the morning, and if I don't feel like doing anything, well, I watch TV, or something. But most of the time they'll all come out to the studio, even if I don't feel like doing it. And then once I get going, go, oh, yeah, I love doing this. This is my story. And even if nobody understands it now, maybe they will later, maybe not. Maybe all the stuff I've got will just come down, end up on a big bonfire. Well, I mean, I'd be dead, so how would I know? Why would I care? So, again, the idea of working to be famous when you're dead is also completely idiotic, because how the hell would you know? You're dead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe as an artist, musician, painter, sculptor, whatever, you have no choice. You need to, quote unquote, need to do what you need to do, right? Some better, I suppose, are easier than other. Some days you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you cannot fall asleep. You go to the studio, and some days say, no, it's 10 o'clock. I don't want to go to the studio. I want to do my music thing, or I want to go for a walk, whatever, right? It's right. I suppose the musician or the artist or the painter inside of you kind of pushes you, today's a normal day, tomorrow's going to be whatever. You wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're doing paint, correct, brushes, and
well, sometimes I wake up and I go, oh, that's yeah. And got something I've been working on. Oh, and it just came to me, and I don't know where from, but I think it's, well, for me anyway. Actually, I believe it should be the same for most people. But I think you need to live just an ordinary life. You just go out, you do dishes, you cook, you go see things, you go for walks and stuff like that. You don't spend an artist shouldn't spend their whole time hanging around with other artists all the time, or musicians hanging around with other musicians all the time. I think that one needs to have a much wider grasp of what's going on around you.
Some artists in general, some painters, some musicians, they don't want to, they're more introverted. They don't want to listen to other people's stuff, or in your case, seeing other people's work, because they influence you on what you trying to do, right? That is a safe statement. I mean, you go to galleries, you see other people's stuff, you go to a museum. It doesn't
Well,
make it.
I've got books and things. We don't where I live here. There's really, there is a gallery, but it's all right. But it's not like it was in Europe or in New York or something. I mean, we just don't have any of that stuff. I mean, I'm aware of what's going on because I have been to these places, and I also, I read a lot. I look at books of people's work, see what they're up to, but. I mean, it's not possible to not be influenced by what's going on around you. I mean, it simply isn't, But you find your way through this,
Yeah. No, you can see somebody else's work or somebody else's gallery or this that, but at the end you need to do what is more appealing to you, right? And then create your own Lance, side of the world, if you will, right? Lance's way of seeing his life. Or
that's right. Well, it's like I've said to sort of younger artists or also younger people. I mean, it's like everybody walks the same way, one foot in front of the other, but they're all different. So in that sameness, it's all different, and it's the same thing with painting or anything else. We all approach it the same way, but it's our way, and so it's different. Yeah, I mean, it has to be it because you're a different person.
But your one the other album that you sent me and I listened to actually in Bandcamp and on the web. It's a new album with the Toronto musician Tim Clement and Ben Watson.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was released on the label In Frequency, which is a very good name, actually. It's a good name for a painting. It's a name for a book also, In Frequency.
Well, that's
how you meeting those people. I mean, when somebody, let's say, if I wanted to collaborate with you, how people get in contact with you? They kind of know your music and they do samples and I'm working to collaborate.
Yeah, with Clement, it was kind of interesting because I've never met him, but I have met his son, and I've worked with his son because his son lives in Vancouver, and I last couple of years ago I would go over there and record with him. And that's how I met his dad. Well, his dad worked with a guy for years called Michael Dagno, who's won all kinds of Oscars for his Life of Pi music, all kinds of things he writes, and. A couple of years ago, I said to Tim, are you interested in putting something together? He said, sure. And I said, well, it's all going to have to be file transfers because I'm not coming to Toronto. I mean, it's difficult enough for me to get on a ferry and go to Vancouver. I just soon stay here, right? And so that's really how. And then this next one came along because I had. I thought, well, I haven't heard anything for a while, so I said, well, you got anything, Tim? Send me something over. And I'll work with it. So he sent me a file and I listened to it and I thought, okay, I actually know what I want to do here because it just sort of opened up something in me. And I had some things that I'd been working on that I thought these will work really nicely with this because it's sort of his was very smooth and mine was very sort of jagged. So I felt that it would work really together. So I actually sat there and with the stuff that he'd sent me, and I have no idea what Ben Watson did on there because he worked with Ben. They just sent me the actual finished file that they had, and I went into it and I took it apart and I put in what I thought was going to work with it, layered it together, did two separate tracks, two completely different things, and sent them off to him, and he was very happy with them. And that's really how that one came about.
Yeah. Wow, that's great, man. The other album that I really like, there are two actually. I want to bring it to attention. One is kind of an old one, 2019, 4 years ago. Dark Heart, released in August 2018. What memory do you have? Because you have done 56, 60 or whatever it is. Can you remember a little bit of?
Well, that one I remember because the label is Another Timber, which is a label in the UK, and it's together with John Abbey's Erstwhile. It's probably the best experimental label in the world.
Got it.
it's fantastic. And so I was like, wow, you got to release. You want to release one of my things, and they'd released another one, an earlier one as well, which was so it's really quite an honor. And I had been working with a Norwegian called Turje Paulsen. Okay, and again, I've never met him, but we're back and forth and back and forth.